please describe to us what the CFC is.
So the CFC is a not-for-profit organization. We're also a fee levy group of Concordia, which means the majority of our funding is received by student money. We work on projects focused around food security on campus, and we also consider ourselves a coalition because we bring together a diversity of working groups that work under our organization, but also consider ourselves allies with similar groups on campus that share the same values and the same mission around food security and food sovereignty on campus.
Great. Could you describe to us what the mission of the CFC is?
The mission of the Concordia Food Coalition is to facilitate a transition to a more sustainable food system on campus, all the while working with faculty, staff, and students alike. And what does a more sustainable food system mean? Sustainability encompasses the three pillars, so ecological, economic, and social. And so we try and tackle all these different facets of sustainability in different ways. Promoting accessibility to more like the ecological side of it would be healthier food that's grown organically, without pesticides, without insecticides, things like that. Economic side of things would be to make it actually affordable for students and economically accessible to students. And the social side of it, I think, is trying to get students to actually have a say in the decisions that are made considering food on campus. And we do a lot of that through our projects that are focused on cooperative development that encourage participative democracy, for example. And so those are kind of different ways that we promote sustainable food systems.
Could you please describe the CFC's structure within its Board of Governors?
So the CFC's Board of Directors is comprised of students, faculty, and staff alike. At the moment, it's made up of mostly students who are, the membership changes at every AGM, just like any not-for-profit or any fee levy group. And so their responsibility is to make a lot of decisions at the administrative level of the organization, and they also take on responsibilities by sitting on one or more of the more administrative committees, that being finance, governance, and HR, which is human resources. And so they are primarily responsible for a lot of policy development, overseeing that our finances are in order, and making sure that our labor practices are sound with the few employees that we do have, but also interns and even volunteers who work on our different projects.
Could you explain to us the structure of your decision making within the CFC?
Yeah, so the decision making is actually not limited to the board of directors, but rather we really work to empower our steering committee. And what our steering committee is where different representatives from our working groups will come together and talk about their projects and the organization as a whole. And so we've created this level of decision making to really encourage like a collectivity of the organization, and to kind of bring together people who are working under the same organization but on many different projects. And so they have a say even in financial distribution of our funds to different projects. And oftentimes the decision making is collaborative, and it's with the board and the steering committee alike. But we really try and bring a lot of decisions that need to be made down to the steering committee level as well, rather than just keeping it on the board level.
Could you talk about the division of labor within the CFC?
In terms of division of labor, we work towards a decentralized model, and we're always working towards this decentralization. We don't have very many employees, as we're a not-for-profit organization, and so we have the coordinator and we have our finance coordinator. Otherwise, depending on the project that you're involved in, sometimes they need general coordinators as well. And so they act as a point person for someone like me, the general coordinator, to touch base with But otherwise, we are very much volunteer-based. And so I would say that they fall into our division of labor, but it is majority volunteer-based.
Could you describe the economic model that the CFC uses for its operations?
So as of last year, we are officially a fee levy group at Concordia, which means most of our funding is coming from student tuition. We get an 8 cent per credit fee levy for undergraduate students, and that's really allowed us to expand and support our projects financially, and it's been great in the past year. However, working groups are encouraged to seek external funding through grants that may apply to their goals or other sources of income on campus, such as the Sustainability Action Fund and special project funds. And so they're not just limited to our funds. In terms of distributing those funds, again, in the past year, this is the first time that we've gone with this model because it's the first year that we have fee levy money. So it's kind of a work in progress, rather. But the way it has worked in the past year is groups interested in receiving funding from us will fill out a funding application, and we set deadlines for them, although you can apply outside of those deadlines. And the first part of the process would be the board reviewing these and approving or denying or just giving feedback, but not ratifying any real decisions concerning the distribution of funds, rather giving their feedback on it and then again bringing it down to the steering committee level so that groups can look at it amongst themselves and decide collectively. So if they see sorts of gaps in funding where they realize, maybe they might not need a certain budget line and another group does need the extra funds, they can reallocate that to them. And so in the past year, it's worked out quite smoothly, but that's the kind of, that's the way in which we distribute our funds within the organization.
So could you describe to us how the CFC was founded and how it became what it is today?
Yeah, so about 2.5 years ago now, there was a student at Concordia who had organized a general health campaign, bringing in guest speakers, having different activities around health. And so I think what really happened was discussions about forming an organization like this came after a professor that works still closely with us, Satoshi Aikida, gave a talk about nutrition and food politics. And through that conversation, there were discussions happening around the major food issues on campus that we felt we should organize around. And so the major corporation that was contracted at the time was something that we really wanted to tackle. But there were also other food issues that came about. And so we formed the coalition. And in that first year, I think what we really thought was valuable was incorporating ourselves as a not-for-profit so that we were recognizable or acknowledged outside of the university landscape as well, or outside of the campus environment as well. And that was I think that was a big strategy in getting the administration to take us seriously as well. Because a lot of the issues we wanted to tackle, we knew we would have to work closely with administration, and so we wanted to be a legitimate organization in their eyes. And so that was a really big factor in becoming a not-for-profit. And since we have just been building up and trying to develop alliances on campus with other groups and working towards our goals and our mission.
Could you describe some of the events and activities that the CFC have participated in?
The CFC organizes 2 major annual events, one being Bite Me Food Week and the other being a transitions conference. So these are 2 events that developed 2 years ago. And so Bite Me actually acts as a kind of orientation for new students and incoming students at the beginning of the academic year. It happens in September every year, and it's a week long of workshops and activities, guest speakers, panel discussions, introducing students to food politics at Concordia. And so that's been really successful in the past. It's a really good education and awareness tool for folks, and it also really helps us recruit, interested people who want to get involved in the organization. Transitions is our winter semester event. It's a day-long conference that's also focused on food politics. That's done in collaboration with the CSU, and it's been quite successful as well. And then there's always small activities that we participate in and organize throughout the year that are smaller, but that can be organized or have participation from our working groups, as well as can be in collaboration with a lot of our allies, such as the CSU, the Hive Cafe, the Farmers Market, etc.
Could you describe, or could you name some of the working groups that are part of the CFC and how the CFCs collaborated to help them develop their projects?
Mm-hmm. So first I'll start with some of the projects that have kind of matured out of the CFC, but they were founded within the CFC. So the Hive Cafe Co-op is a really big one that now is its own autonomous entity and its own cooperative. But that organizing for the development of that cafe really started within the CFC. Another one is the Co-op des Brasseries Luminées, which is a group that's focused on brewing their own beer. And so they've been working on their own and incorporated themselves as well and are their own entity, but also came from the CFC. What we have now currently are different projects. So one being Le Campus Potager, which is a very, very popular project that has lots of volunteers, and they do on-campus gardens. And so they're simply growing food, but it's a really big step towards food sovereignty on campus. And they have their own markets that they've started up that are bi-monthly, but they also work to provide their harvest to our allies such as the Hive or the Farmers Market and places like that. So they've been really successful in the past year. We also have another co-op development project called the Burritoville Co-op Project. This is a restaurant that's been in the Concordia campus area for a really long time. And we've been working with the owners of the restaurant to purchase their business and convert it into a solidarity cooperative. So that's been off the ground in the last year. We also work with different stakeholders on campus on the Loyola Greenhouse project. Now this stemmed primarily out of the CSU, but we're now participating in discussions about governance structure and how the operations of a greenhouse at Loyola would look like in the future. Another working group that we have is called Bike to Farm. This I like to see as more of an educational project where we organize bike trips to organic farms in the surrounding area of Montreal. So you have a doable bike trip, so not too long, but long enough that to an organic farm, and the idea would be that you camp for a weekend on that farm and also participate in different jobs on the farm, and they often get to eat a lot of the food that's produced there and just be more connected to kind of food production and how that works. And it's a really good project to just connect people to their food.
So could you describe to us some of the long-term and short-term goals of the CFC?
I think a lot of our short-term goals are addressed through our working groups in projects such as food production and co-op development and things like this. I think they each work to put us a step forward towards like the greater long-term goal of a completely sustainable food system. And they all contribute to that long-term goal, but I think the basic long-term goal would be just like a sustainable food system that is primarily student-run, and that also brings in community members and local businesses that share our values around sustainability and food security.
Could you describe the partnerships that the CFC has?
Yeah, I think a lot of our partnerships have developed on campus through organizations who have encouraged us to keep going with our projects and who have supported us along the way and collaborated with us in organizing and given us any support that they're capable of providing. So a lot of these partnerships include Sustainable Concordia, the Sustainability Action Fund, the CSU as well, and there are also professors within the university who have supported the organization and our projects as well, such as Satoshi Aikida and others.
So could you describe some of the strengths and the weaknesses of the CFC?
I think some of our strengths as an organization is compared to a lot of food-related organizations on campus, we act as a place where students can come with new ideas, and we've even in the past considered ourselves kind of an incubator for new projects, and we're really open to any sort of project that is related to sustainability or moving towards a more sustainable food system. And so I think that is a way that we offer something to students that other groups might not do in quite the same way that the CFC does. And so yeah, all students are kind of welcome to come with new ideas pertaining to food security and food sovereignty. In terms of weaknesses, I feel that we are still a very new organization, and so we are dealing with a lot of internal organizational stuff that still needs to be set in stone. Lots of policy development, edits to our constitution and things like that. We're ever evolving, and we haven't quite gotten to a place of, say, maturity as an organization yet.
So could you tell us what the CFC brings to the Concordia community?
I think a way the CFC really contributes in a unique way to our community is that as opposed to a lot of food-related groups on campus that are working on a specific mandate and working on a specific goal, we have the potential to expand on our food system and help it grow in a sustainable way. We're always working on new projects and developing new projects, and so that creates additions to our food system and democratizing the food system. And again, lots of these projects kind of graduate from the CFC and become their own entity, and that's when they sort of work towards that one goal that they might have, whereas the CFC acts as that central place where we can continue to develop new projects that will add to our sovereignty as a food system.
Could you please tell us how the CFC contributes to sustainability at Concordia?
I think the CFC contributes to sustainability at Concordia by being very focused on food as an issue. Although we do have other organizations like the Frigo Vert and the Hive who are also working towards mandates related to food, the Food Coalition is kind of that overviewer of all that is food at Concordia, and so we're consistently keeping track of what's going on with food, whether it be on the student run level or the administrative level, and so we really tackle food as a whole on campus, and so we're kind of that go-to organization when it comes to food and food security.
So could you tell us how people can get involved with the CFC?
You can get involved with the CFC by attending one of our steering committee meetings. That's another a big role of the steering committee is acting as a platform where people can come and just be informed about our projects and what's going on with them. If the projects need support or more people power, that's where an ideal place for people to kind of get their foot in and be like, this is something that interests me, this is where I'd like to get involved. Throughout the academic year, we also like to hold what we call CFC 101s, which is basically giving the down low on the organization and each of our projects on a more introductory level, so that people who want to get involved with the organization but aren't quite aware of all the things that we do can be in a more maybe in a more comfortable space to ask questions and really get to know each project on their own terms, and develop interests in whatever project we have going at the time. And then lastly, you can always just sit down with a member of the CFC one-on-one. I really like to be in touch with people who express interest and sit down with them one-on-one and see what their interests are, and give them suggestions as to projects that they might be interested in.
How would someone go to contact the CFC?
So you can contact us by email at the Concordia Food Coalition at gmail.com. We also have a website, concordiafoodcoalition.com, and a Facebook page as well. And so, yeah, we're mostly accessible through the online platforms.
So could you describe the history of the Burritoville project and how it's become what it is today?
Sure. Actually, in the first year that the Food Coalition started up, in that same summer that we were incorporating as a not-for-profit, we heard through the grapevine that the owners of Burritoville were looking to sell their business. And this has already been a restaurant that has been very loved amongst the Concordia community. Their clientele is very much based on of students, or comprised of students. And it's just like a great space that students used to study in. It's right next to campus, and so it's really felt like a part of campus for years. And so when we heard that they were going to sell it, we were first thinking, well, we wouldn't want someone to buy the business that would change the whole feel of the restaurant. But secondly, that this is something that maybe, you know, organizers within the Food Coalition could take on and, you know, keep it the way it is, but also expand it as a student space. I think it already fit with our values because they strive to provide organic food. They have a vegetarian menu, which is more sustainable in, you know, in certain terms. And so that was something that we really worked towards from the beginning, and it's been quite a long time coming. And we just recently actually have switched over the ownership to the cooperative. And so now the restaurant is owned by the cooperative. After a long process of, you know, looking for sources of income to be able to purchase the business, lots of negotiation, lots of planning and organizing. But as it stands now, we've closed the restaurant for 2 weeks, and we are undergoing renovations, and we're going to reopen at the end of August as a cooperative and start our membership drive to gain memberships. But the menu won't be changing at all. If anything, we'll be adding new items. But we've been very committed to keeping it the way it was and just, you know, adding on to what the restaurant has already become.
Could you describe to us what you would consider an ideal food system at Concordia?
I think the first thing to tackle towards an ideal food system would be to get all the corporate entities out of our campus in terms of food service providers. And I'd like to see all the spaces that they currently occupy reoccupied by either student-run initiatives or local businesses that share our values around food. So, you know, providing as much as possible organic food, locally sourced food, and just wholesome food. I'd also like to see in the long run being able to actually produce more food for our campus. So actually have more outlets for food production on campus, so that it's hyper localized and that students can produce this food and source it to student-run cafes or even these potential local businesses if they were open to that sort of collaboration and having more of a closed-loop food system where we're producing, distributing, and eating all the food that we have had a part in making, in growing.
Could you please describe the history of Concordia's relationship with multinational food corporations since you've been a student at Concordia?
In my experience at Concordia, I've seen the biggest presence of multinational food corporations in the administration-controlled food spaces on campus, so the residence cafeterias and various cafes within the downtown and Loyola campuses. And I've come to believe that the reason why we have such a big presence of multinational corporations in these spaces is because I feel like the administration, in a procedural way, it's just easier for them to contract all these spaces as a big, like, lump of things that, of spaces that a company can be contracted to to manage, rather than setting every individual space offer a different bidding process. I think it's just more work for them. And so I think that they've just chosen to go with this model. But now I think we're working towards convincing the administration in the next 5 years, because that's when their new contract will end, to adopt a different process for those contracts, so that we can try and eliminate the presence of multinational corporations on campus.
So what do you think the role of multinational corporations should be in public institutions like Concordia University?
I don't think there really is a place for multinational corporations in any sort of public institution. I think that there's always, like beyond issues of food, but in any sort of, sort of structure, I think there's always alternatives for more democratic processes, for more collaborative structures where we can work from the bottom up rather than in a top-down structure. And so I think that we should always be working towards giving the most amount of people a voice in whatever you're dealing with, whether it be food or waste management or any of the administrative things that the university does. I think there's always room for more participative democracy in a way, and I don't think that having corporate models is really useful. And I think, again, it's really just an easy solution to something that maybe a group of people don't want to put as much effort into.